Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome, I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company here on GB News TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country and indeed around the world. I'm looking at what the Sunak package means to you, the United Kingdom economy and our standing in the world. Plus the role of club cards and coupons in helping you through the cost of living crisis, with a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, a former Dragon and the creator of the Tesco club card. All of that and more to come, but first let's bring you right up to date with the news. Here's Olivia.
Thank you, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Former US President Donald Trump has told a pro-gun convention America should prioritise funding for school security over aid to Ukraine. The summit was held just days after the murder of 19 children and 2 adults in a primary school in Texas. Hundreds of protesters are demonstrating outside the National Rifle Association meeting in the state. Mr. Trump rejected calls for gun control and says instead there should be a top-to-bottom overhaul of school security.
There should be strong exterior fencing, metal detectors, and the use of new technology to make sure that no unauthorized individual can ever enter the school with a weapon. No one should ever be able to get anywhere near a classroom until they have been checked, scanned, screened, and fully approved.
Meanwhile, there's growing anger towards the police over their response to the attack. Survivors, including children, were calling emergency services for help from the classroom long after 18-year-old Salvador Ramos had entered with a semi-automatic rifle. Police officers were in the hallway outside, waiting for more assistance. Colonel Stephen McCraw, director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, says officers should have acted sooner.
Hey, from the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can.
Ukraine's military says its soldiers may need to retreat from their last stronghold in the east of the country to avoid being captured. Moscow has sent thousands of troops into the Luhansk region, attacking from 3 sides in an attempt to encircle Ukrainian forces holding out in the city of Severodonetsk. This comes as the Russian Ministry of Defence has claimed it has successfully tested a Zircon hypersonic missile. The UN says a record 220 million people may go hungry because of the conflict in Ukraine. An official says 6 million tonnes of grain and almost 14 million tonnes of corn are blocked in Ukrainian ports. Rising costs of food and fertiliser are threatening global food security. The number of people in the world suffering malnutrition was on the rise even before the conflict. It reached almost 200 million in 53 countries last year. Football fans are welcoming the news that the sale of Chelsea Football Club will go ahead. The Chelsea Supporters Trust have issued a statement congratulating the consortium, led by Todd Boy, on its successful takeover bid. The club was put up for sale in March when owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned for his links to President Putin. It's expected the deal will be completed on Monday. Thousands of people are gathering in Belfast today to celebrate the centenary of the creation of Northern Ireland. There are speeches outside Stormont this morning with a parade into Belfast city centre. There were plans to celebrate 100 years since partition last year, but events had to be postponed because of the pandemic. EasyJet says it's cancelling over 200 flights over the next 10 days from Gatwick, starting from today. The airline says the move isn't connected to the IT issues they were experiencing earlier this week. They apologise for the disruption, but say they're necessary to provide reliable services over the busy half-term break. Meanwhile, travel company TUI have also announced a small number of flight cancellations at Birmingham, Gatwick and Manchester. And the stakes are high as 60,000 Liverpool fans travel to Paris for tonight's Champions League final clash with Real Madrid. The Reds will take on the Spanish champions at the Stade de France. However, fears were raised about the pitch after it emerged it was only laid on Thursday because of the late allocation of the game in February. The final was originally meant to be held in St. Petersburg, but it was moved to Paris after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Alistair.
Olivia, thank you. You now know what the Chancellor plans to do to help you get through the cost of living crisis, how much it'll cost in extra borrowing and how much it'll cost the oil and gas giants in extra tax. Now, opinion in today's newspapers varies, from The Times' Matthew Parris welcoming the return of grown-up government via The Sun calling for tax cuts now, to The Telegraph saying that Sunak has failed the squeezed middle and that the windfall tax will put businesses off investing in the UK. Now, we're going to go through all of that just a bit, how wise a prescription it really is and what impact it might have on the economy and on you, and how the way that we shop has changed as we all try to make those pounds and pennies go a little bit further. What I'm not going to do is bang on about parties, reports on parties, or the rest of it. I think you know what you think and have probably had more than enough about it. So with that, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, a top businessman, a low-tax lobbyist, a top financial journalist and a former dragon from the den. Also, as those discount vouchers for shoppers surge to the fore all over the newspapers and loyalty cards become increasingly important for millions of us, the woman who invented probably the most successful of them all, the Tesco Club card, will be joining me live. Now, we all of us want to know what you think about the politics and the economics of the Sunak package. Your own cost of living challenges, your shopping tricks and pitfalls, and any other ideas that you might have to help others get through this trying period. You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet us or me, or you can go on Facebook, and I will share the best of your ideas at the end of the programme. So let's get right underway, and I'm delighted to be joined first of all by Lord Norman Lamont, the former Chancellor from 1990 until 1993, and down the line, John Mills, Chairman of John Mills Limited and the founder of the Institute for Prosperity. Norman, let me start with you. Did Rishi Sunak get it about right?
Well, can I say, first of all, I think Rishi Sunak was faced with the most appalling circumstances, and I thought I had quite a difficult time when Chancellor, but I'm pleased I'm not Chancellor now. I think, on the whole, the package was pretty good. It probably, for my personal taste, went rather further, wider and larger than I would have liked. I think the very good thing about it and what was wanted was that it concentrated the vast majority of its firepower on helping the worst off. 8 million people are going to get something like £1,200. Some people are going to get even more than that.
Yeah.
That is good. Where I perhaps have a slight reservation is that I'm not sure it was necessary to double the £200 on bills to £400 and to convert the loan into cash. An awful lot of that is just going to the middle. And I'm not sure that I really think that was absolutely necessary.
On that specifically, he's also, to almost a technical point, getting a bit of stick that if somebody's terribly wealthy and has 2 homes or even 3 homes, they get that for each of the houses. Can't he just, with a flick of a pen, change that?
Well, I rather agree with you. Obviously, it's a bit unnecessary to give someone who has 2 homes, let alone 3. But I don't know administratively how easy that would be. It might be quite complicated.
But it should be done politically. It would make sense.
Well, in equity terms, it would make sense. But one has to put the practicalities, one has to take them into account.
John, let me bring you in at this stage, if I may. I hope you heard what Norman had to say. From a business point of view and someone who is committed to prosperity, Norman says got it about as right as he could have done in tight circumstances, but perhaps a little bit too broad. What's the businessman's point of view?
I think most businessmen would say that Rishi Sunak did get it just about right. I think the balance, as Norman Lamont said, with a lot of the benefit going to poorer people is right. I think there is a risk of having a windfall tax on future investment, but I think that's relatively small. I think this is quite a sensible redistribution of resources within the UK economy. My concern is that the strain that everybody's feeling at the moment on their incomes is a sign of more serious underlying problems with climate change, with rising healthcare costs, with rising social care costs, rising pensions as we all get older on average, maybe increased in military expenditure as well. And all this is running up a huge burden on incomes over the next few years. And unless we get the growth rate of the economy up, I think there's going to be a really serious problem in terms of falling living standards over the coming period. So I think we're at the beginning of quite a tricky time over the next few years.
In terms of getting the growth rate going again, I mean, the forecast from the Bank of England is pretty nightmarish. The right wing of your party and an awful lot of voters via the Sun newspaper are saying the best way to solve both of those problems is cut personal taxation right now. The national insurance, the standard rate of income tax. Cut our taxes so we can get out there and spend more and do what you want done and do what John's just said he wants done.
Well, that was really my point about going for the middle and did he go too far? That is arguably, instead of the £400, you might have been able to have a tax cut. But make no mistake about it, this package does give some stimulus to the economy. Not too much. I think he's got it about right. But it does give some stimulus, admittedly through cash injection rather than tax cuts to the economy. But let me just say this. I think people get carried away about growth. Yes, we want growth. We must have growth. We want to aim for growth in longer term. Our main problem at the moment is inflation, and we've got to get that down. You've got to get that down. It's very difficult to grow your way out of inflation. And when people talk about going for growth, I mean, I've lived long enough to have seen plenty of chancellors announcing they got a dash for growth, and often it's ended in tears because all it's done is accelerate inflation. So, I mean, when people talk about the dangers of stagflation, the difficulty is you've got 2 conflicting problems. And in my mind, you have to deal with the inflation before you deal with the stagnation, because inflation itself will lead to unemployment and stagnation. So that has got to be the top priority.
John Mills, inflation more of a worry than growth?
I'm not at all sure I think that's right. I think a lot of the problems we've got with inflation have come from the fact that the growth rate has been so low over the recent period. And I think it's going to be very difficult to get the rate of inflation down substantially if the economy isn't growing at all. I think there's going to be pressures coming from all directions that are going to push the prices up. I think, I mean, I agree with Lord Lamont. There's a very difficult balance to be struck here. But I think that going for deflating the economy to try and get rid of inflation is going to have huge side effects on the growth rate and on the stability of the economy generally. And it's not really the right balance to strike. I think we've got to be more keen on getting the growth rate up, even if there's some risks on inflation coming down more slowly than we would all really like.
Well, we have inflation of 10%. That is an extremely high rate. And the longer it goes on, and there's no guarantee that energy prices are going to fall, the more it will become embedded. People's behaviour will be affected. They will ask for wage increases that match that, and that pushes the rate up further. We already have a situation where the underlying core rate of inflation, that is inflation minus energy and minus food, is over 6%. That illustrates that it's not just energy. We've got an inflation problem there as well.
That's a crucial point. So just to make that crystal clear, not least to me, but more importantly to the folk listening to us on GB News Radio and watching on TV, that even if there wasn't a war in Ukraine, even if there wasn't a disruption to gas and oil supplies because of Russia, you are saying that core inflation right now would still be about 5 or 6%.
Well, that is what the figures...
3 times the Bank of England's target.
The headline version is 5 times the Bank of England's figure. The core version is 3 times the Bank of England's target. And that is a serious problem. I think this is probably a consequence of the QE that we had. I think it was...
Quantitative easing, pumping money into the economy.
Yeah. I think it was right to have that after the banking crisis, but I'm not so sure we needed to have QE and the big fiscal package that we had in 2020 to cope with COVID. Yeah. So that has helped. And also we've got, don't forget, this situation where a lot of people couldn't spend during COVID, and there are a lot of savings, pent-up demand, which could come back into the economy and could cause prices to go further up again. So yeah. I think you have to look ahead and be very cautious about this. And when John says growth is the issue rather than inflation, I do think inflation, by making us uncompetitive, can cause unemployment. I think it was a Labour Prime Minister, I think it might have been Wilson or Callaghan, who said inflation is the mother of unemployment. Mm.
Yeah. John, let me bring you back in on that. I mean, do comment on what Norman's just said if you want to, and you may well do. But I want to put something else out to you with your businessman's hat on. And that is a brilliant piece written by Juliet Samuels in The Telegraph today. And that is coming away from the personal measures that were in the Sunak package to the windfall tax or the emergency levy on profits, whatever you want to call it. Samuels argues today that that's a dreadful signal to the international business community, who we desperately need to invest in our country to create more products, to assist with that growth that both of you are talking about. Do you agree with her?
Well, I think there is a problem that if you tax people on a windfall basis, you undermine confidence, but that has to be balanced against the requirements to mitigate the huge increases in energy costs there are. Nearly all decisions you take politically have got downsides as well as upsides, and I think this is one of them. But I think if you look at the balance between the two, I rather reluctantly would come down in favour of the windfall tax on the grounds that the urgency of the situation for most people in budgetary terms on heating and energy generally is so serious. I think you've got to make a difficult choice here. But my feeling is that the right choice is to go for what the Chancellor's done rather than to refuse to do so.
You're a former Energy Secretary as well as a former Chancellor of the Exchequer. Do you share that analysis of the windfall tax, or do you think it is an error of judgment in terms of the signal that it sends out to profit creation and investment in the UK?
Well, I don't want to die in the ditch about this, and I don't think it's a question of ideology, but I don't greatly care for windfall taxes, and I would have preferred that we hadn't had it. We're desperately short of energy supplies. We're trying to increase it. We want to have more energy self-sufficiency. We're in a competitive market in the world where people can go far more easily to exploit the oil reserves of certain countries in the Middle East. They'll get a firm welcome there. The taxes will be lower. Also, we've spent an awful lot of time telling oil and gas companies to go away. We don't want you. We want renewables only. And suddenly we've realised that we've overdone it. And I think it's very confusing and very uncertain for the oil and gas companies that one minute they're told not to invest, and the next minute they're told, unless you invest, we're going to tax you out of existence.
The flip side of that coin, Norman first and then John, which I find quite extraordinary, is that when Labour were proposing it, BP and Shell were saying, oh, windfall tax won't impact at all on our investment strategy. The minute Sunak announces it, then the oil companies trade association, call it what you will, is saying, oh, this is going to freeze our investment. I mean, what a shambles for some of the biggest, most profitable companies in the UK and around the world.
Well, I'm not going to defend them. I suppose it's to be predicted that they would, whatever happened, say they don't like it. But you've got to remember, I mean, when you talk about these massive companies, the sums of money that they make are huge.
Yes.
But they are siphoning...
As were the losses a couple of years ago.
Well, yeah, but if you take a company like BP, it lost enormous amounts in Russia when it had to sell its interests there. We want these companies to make big profits in order to go, A, into the exchequer, but B, also to go to pension funds. An awful lot of pension funds are invested in oil and gas, in gas companies. But above all, we've got to remember that exploring for oil and gas in the North Sea, and there probably isn't some great El Dorado there any longer. No. But it is full of risk.
Yeah. Let's. Do you want to come in on that, John? Or I've got another question I want to put to you, but I did say if you want to comment upon what Norman's just said, do feel free to.
Well, what I would say is that I think that companies invest if they think that there's profitable opportunities, and both BP and Shell have got strong enough covenants to be able to raise whatever money they need for that investment. I understand how a windfall tax is a bit of a discouragement, but I don't think that it's going to bankrupt these big oil companies to sustain the windfall tax. I think we ought to go ahead with it.
Yeah. OK. Let me change the subject for the last 2 minutes, and we literally have got 2 minutes left, so I will divide it evenly, as I'm an egalitarian and a good chap. First one is to you, John. I'm not going to cast you as being a Labour supporter, but you are a little warmer towards Labour and have been historically, obviously, than Norman is, as a former Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer. Did you expect more from Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer? I mean, I came away from that Sunak statement thinking that all they had to do was to say, oh, they've nicked our ideas. There wasn't much else to make me think, hang on a minute, here's another product on the shelf I might consider.
Well, I think what Labour has done is come out very well out of all this, in the sense that what Labour's done is to put forward proposals which initially the Conservatives rejected, but which subsequently they've adopted. So I think on the whole, Labour's come out smelling of roses on this one.
The allegation that Rishi bided his time and then actually nicked what Rachel Reeves and Starmer had been saying all along, but also the absence of an alternative strategy. Many in your party are saying they're just playing into their hands at the moment.
Well, the thing that most distressed me about the introduction of the windfall tax was the indications that appeared in newspapers that it was the fact that it was popular in opinion polls that decided the government to come to that decision. I think make up your mind on the merits, but don't just be governed by opinion polls.
Yeah. And the final bit of the question to you, and I won't put it to John because it is specifically to you, it does strike me that there is a profound rethink going on within your party, and I'd be intrigued to know who you thought was winning. Those who say, yes, we can borrow whatever we need to get folk through this crisis, and those who say, no, we've actually got to rediscover the capacity to cut taxes, cut spending, shrink government, get back to what we used to do when you were in government with John and when Margaret Thatcher was in government in the 80s?
Well, I think there is a lot of argument about this, but I think some of the people calling for tax cuts, I want tax cuts, of course I want tax cuts, but you've got to remember that the government were faced with a situation rather similar to a war. People say the level of taxes is unequal since just after the Second World War, but we've been through an extraordinary situation. And when Rishi Sunak had to dole out nearly £400 billion, that's 20% 3% of GDP. Do people expect you can do that without it having an effect on taxes and borrowing? It can't. Of course, the Chancellor wants to get back to a situation where he can reduce expenditure. And expenditure as a proportion of GDP, I'm sure, will come down. And maybe there will be a chance for tax cuts, as the Chancellor said he wants to do.
Great to see you again. Thank you very much indeed, Norman Lamont. And Sir John, always a pleasure to see you as well, albeit down the line. Best to you and to your lovely lady as well. Send her my love. And we'll see you very soon here in the studio as well, I hope. Thank you very much indeed, Sir John Mills and Lord Norman Lamont. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. That's the big picture. We'll be drilling much more into the smaller picture, coupons, vouchers and loyalty cards. Lots more besides still to come on the programme right after this break. EasyJet passengers were left stranded after a major IT fault forced the airline to cancel 200 flights. And fears of a rocky start to half-term holidays are growing as customers at Gatwick Airport report slow-moving check-in queues and issues with boarding. Talking to Simon Calder about all of that, but first let's bring you right up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry with warm, sunny spells and the odd shower possible in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest of England, there will be plenty of sunshine this afternoon. With light winds, temperatures will widely reach the high teens Celsius. There'll be a little fair weather cloud across the southeast with plenty of warm, sunny spells. An isolated light shower is possible in the east. It'll be a fine afternoon for southern Wales, where it will be dry with plenty of warm sunshine and just a little fair weather cloud. The northwest of England will have a little more cloud, and this could also produce an isolated light shower. However, there'll also be plenty of sunny spells, and most will stay dry. It's a similar story for the northeast of England this afternoon. Bright or sunny spells for most, with an isolated light shower possible. That said, most places will remain dry here too. There's little change in the weather in southern Scotland. Fair weather cloud and sunny spells here, with the odd shower possible towards the east. It will also be a fine and dry afternoon across Northern Ireland. Again, a little fair weather cloud is likely, with a very low chance of catching a light shower. Remaining mostly dry this evening with plenty of late sunny spells on offer, although clouds steadily drifting west. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. It's coming up towards 12:30. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. As I told you just before we took that little break, EasyJet passengers were left stranded after a major IT fault forced the airline to cancel 200 flights. And fears of a rocky start to half-term holidays generally are growing as customers at Gatwick Airport report slow-moving check-in queues and issues with boarding. Flights scheduled to depart between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. were cancelled or postponed because of the system's failure, with some passengers told to book alternative flights. Rings a horrible bell, doesn't it? Passengers stranded at the airport described scenes of confusion as they waited for hours for information about the status of their flights. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the travel editor of The Independent, Simon Calder. And there he is. Look. When we read about all of this in the papers and heard about it last night, I said to the team, I want to talk to Simon because you'd have thought after all of the COVID disruption and what have you, these guys would be up and running and hit the ground running. What on earth's gone wrong?
Well, I'm going to have to take you back 2 years, Alistair, to the start of 2020, when the UK undeniably had absolutely the best aviation industry in the world. We've got two of the great airlines, British Airways and EasyJet, main base of operations for Ryanair, which of course is the biggest budget airline in Europe. On top of that, we got Jet2, we got Virgin Atlantic, fantastic airlines. However, the onerous, expensive, complex rules that the government imposed meant that the UK's aviation industry was far harder hit than any other countries. So they fell further. They are now desperate to get back into the game. And so EasyJet and British Airways both promised, well, certainly in the case of EasyJet, their busiest ever summer from Gatwick. I was quite startled by that. I thought, how are they going to do that? I'm surprised after letting go so many great aviation professionals that they're able to do that. But no, they said that's what we're going to do. And unfortunately, it has simply not survived first contact with reality, which is why last night EasyJet told me they were cancelling from today until a week on Monday, 240 flights. This represents maybe 36 to 40,000 passengers, almost all of them half-term holiday makers who have just been told, sorry, your flight's not going. Extraordinary times.
Sure, I understand that. What I don't understand, second point I don't understand, and a whole list of many things I don't understand, Simon, is IT failure. I mean, that IT failure has got nothing to do with whether you're flying out of Heathrow or Gatwick. You're an airline. You run an IT system. We operate on an IT system. Your newspaper operates on an IT system. For goodness sakes, how can that crash again and again?
Well, we don't know. I mean, EasyJet, to be fair, hasn't had anything like the same series of IT failures that British Airways has had, partly because some of bits of British Airways IT goes back, I understand, to the 1970s. EasyJet didn't exist until 1995, so I would cut them a bit of slack on that. It was awful on Thursday afternoon when that happened, and we saw over 200 flights cancelled, many of them where passengers were actually sitting on the aircraft ready to go on their holiday, only to be told you're not going anywhere. But it is the more relentless under-resourcing, simply not having enough passengers to run, enough staff to run the number of flights that you've promised to your passengers. Someone put it to me who I talked to who'd been stuck at Gatwick, you know, how can you sell something which doesn't exist? This flight doesn't exist, and as a result, people are being extremely stressed. Now, can I be absolutely clear what your rights are? And you know, there will be hundreds, possibly thousands of people watching you now, Alistair, who have got those emails from Ryanair, from EasyJet, forgive me. Ryanair not really cancelling anything, neither is Jet2, neither is Wizz Air. They got an email from EasyJet. It says, sorry, we've cancelled your flight. Click here for a refund. Click here to rebook. By the way, that's only on EasyJet. And they fail to mention the fact that if EasyJet can't get you to your destination on the day you were supposed to get there, it has to pay for your ticket on British Airways or Ryanair or Jet2 or whoever. Furthermore, of course, they have to give you cash compensation because this is squarely their responsibility, and you're entitled to that, as well as hotel accommodation if you need that, because they've disrupted your holiday plans.
Simon, we're going to clip that last bit up and bang it on the website and bang it out on social media as well, because, as always, you are the friend of the passenger and the friend of the consumer with great authority, greater than most that I know. A pleasure to talk to you. Have a lovely weekend, and thanks for breaking into it to talk to us. Travel editor Simon Calder there. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon. After the break, the Prime Minister implied measures of up to £1,000 for 8 million homes across the UK will be enough. So will Rishi Sunak's plan be enough to come to the rescue? But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news. Here once again is Olivia.
Thank you. It's 12:34. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Former US President Donald Trump has told a pro-gun convention America should prioritise funding for school security over aid to Ukraine. The summit was held just days after the murder of 19 children and 2 adults in a primary school in Texas. Hundreds of protesters are demonstrating outside the National Rifle Association meeting in the state. Mr. Trump rejected calls for gun control and says instead there should be a top-to-bottom overhaul of school security.
There should be strong exterior fencing, metal detectors, and the use of new technology to make sure that no unauthorized individual can ever enter the school with a weapon. No one should ever be able to get anywhere near a classroom until they have been checked, scanned, screened, and fully approved.
Ukraine's military says its soldiers may need to retreat from their last stronghold in the east of the country to avoid being captured. Moscow has sent thousands of troops into the Luhansk region, attacking from 3 sides in an attempt to encircle Ukrainian forces holding out in the city of Severodonetsk. It comes as the Russian Ministry of Defense claims it successfully tested a Zircon hypersonic missile. Ireland has confirmed its first case of the monkeypox virus. The Health Service executive says the case was confirmed in the east of the country last night. Yesterday, the UK Health Security Agency says the number of cases in England is 101, while the total in the UK is 106. Football fans are welcoming the news that the sale of Chelsea Football Club will go ahead. The Chelsea Supporters Trust have issued a statement congratulating the consortium led by Todd Boy on its successful takeover bid. The club was put up for sale in March when owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned for his links to President Putin. In the last hour, he's released a statement saying it's been an honour of a lifetime to be involved with Chelsea. It's expected the deal will be completed on Monday. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. In just a moment, Alistair will be back with you.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 20 to 1 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. As we were saying before all of those breaks, the Prime Minister has implied that measures of up to £1,000 for 8 million homes across the UK should be enough. But will Rishi Sunak's plan really be enough to come to the rescue of all of us? Millions of people across England have fallen into really serious financial hardship over the past 2 years. And anti-poverty campaigners say that the number of people needing to visit food banks is rising. So, our East of England reporter Ed Crawford has been to visit a food bank in Downham Market, Norfolk, and he's been speaking to staff and those worst hit by the accelerating cost of living crisis.
Downham Market in the heart of Norfolk is similar to many towns across the country. This once flourishing market town is now seeing the effects of the cost of living crisis. On the outskirts of town, a busy food bank managed by Alex Coates is helping some of Downham Market's most in need. For Lyndon Trundle, a difficult turn of events left him struggling to stretch out his monthly budget.
I did actually have a meal last night, and that was the only meal that I had of the day. You know, the rest of it was kind of like trying to fill myself up with tea and what have you, so that my stomach hadn't shrunk to the size of a golf ball.
With dwindling resources, Lyndon has been forced to have less meals.
I tell you all this much, yeah, if you're hungry enough, you'll eat it. You will eat it, you know. There it is.
The food bank has seen a dramatic rise in usage, and as Lyndon Leake, one of the volunteers, fears, there may be worse yet to come.
You know, we're just tipping the iceberg, I think, at the moment, and it can only get worse. Because unless the government actually really step forward, I don't see how we can resolve this quickly. It's a long-term project, sadly.
Alex Coates, who manages the food bank, also worries about the future for those in Downham Market.
It seems that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider and wider. In Downham Market we have quite a substantial amount of poor people, and people are just trying to work out whether they can afford to feed themselves or heat their homes. They have not been able to afford to do both. If people now can't afford to do what they need to do to survive and can't make ends meet on the money that they're getting, if the fuel problems and everything else keeps going up the way it is, I don't know where we're going to be in a few months' time.
With the cost of living crisis continuing with no end in sight, it seems that going forwards, more people will be forced into using the food bank. One story that's resounding throughout the country, and especially here in Downham Market, is that people are having to pick between heating their house or heating their food. From Downham Market, this is Ed Crawford for GB News.
It was indeed from Downham Market, and I'm delighted to say that Ed can join me live now. Ed, absolutely intriguing package, and was very taken by the examples and also the story of the people who work there. What was your... I mean, you're a journalist first and foremost, so you go in there, you see it for the first time. What was the sense that you came away with?
Well, the sense I came away with was actually, as we're seeing in the stats and facts, food bank usage is on the rise. It was very interesting in Downham Market because the volunteers were talking particularly how they are seeing an influx of people who are fully employed. No longer are food banks the preserve of the underemployed or the unemployed, because a lot of people are struggling to pay the bills. So they are finding that increasing numbers of fully employed people are struggling to put food on the table whilst pay the bills. Also, another alarming trend is that more and more people are going in and they're asking how can they conserve energy whilst preparing food. A lot of people are now concerned more about their energy prices than hunger, unfortunately. And it seems like, I know it's a cliche, but it seems like certainly come winter, people are going to have to choose between heating and eating.
It is extraordinary. I was very, very taken by that. And also the guy at the beginning of the package with the long grey hair who said, you know, if you're hungry, you'll eat it. We had people on the programme a wee while ago, and I'm very conscious of where you are in East Anglia, one of the real gardens of England, as it were, even talking about people growing their own to help make ends meet. It's not just a handout society. It's, come on, do something for yourself as well society, isn't it?
That's it. There's a lot of people who are turning to sort of home cultivation, and it's, if you look on a sort of viewing statistics on YouTube and all sorts, there's a great enthusiasm for growing your own vegetables. Any council around East Anglia will tell you there is a huge waiting list now on allotment spaces. Allotments, growing your own vegetables, are becoming increasingly popular. Part of that has to be down to the cost of living crisis, which, as we all know, is rising the largest that it ever has in 30 years. So the financial pressure is going to continue for some years to come, it seems.
Crawford, great to see you there, and thank you very much for both the package and the conversation. That's our East of England reporter there, Ed Crawford. Now, funnily enough, talking of Downham Market, I used to live on an RAF station near there called Marham. But before that, I was delighted to live at RAF Scampton. Now, Scampton was the home of 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters. And parked outside the entrance was a mighty Lancaster bomber. As the Spitfire was the icon of fighter command, the Lancaster was undoubtedly for Bomber Command. It and its Barnes-Wallis bouncing bombs starred in one of my favourite films, The Dam Busters. But it's now starred in a new movie, which had its premiere last week. Here, for you, is a sneak peek.
I was 20 years old, very naive. Didn't have any experience of life at all. You knew you were facing death all the time. Night after night after night after night. But it's just the thing you accepted.
A pet version of mine is what I call retrospective historians. Even now, if I met one, I'd ask them just two questions. Were you there? Were you personally aware of the circumstances and conditions at that time? The answer to both those questions is no, so keep your bloody mouth shut.
They were literally a different breed, and I'm delighted to be joined by David Fairhead, who is the co-director, who also co-directed the celebrated film Spitfire. And I didn't know what was going to be in that clip, but that's exactly where I wanted to start, because you've got the Lancaster badge there on your lapel, and the pictures that we opened with are incredible and moving for anyone like me, an RAF brat. But it's actually the men and the women who make this a very special piece of work, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, just like Spitfire, what we realised is that, you know, if you want to know how many rivets there are in an aeroplane, read a book. But if you want to know what it was like to fly in one, to fight in one, then this is the story for you. And we very much use in both films the aeroplane as the vehicle to tell those people's stories.
And the role of women within it, and I'm not any great sort of, you know, egalitarian tub thumper, but I know, again, because of my background, that at one level they were delivery drivers and they played a vital role, but also ground support at RAF stations. They had a key role to play as well in keeping those aircraft and those men in the air.
Absolutely, they did. I mean, you know, every RAF station had like 3,000 or 4,000 people working on it to keep those aircraft aloft, and it was reckoned that there were 100 people to get one Lancaster and its 7 crew in the air. And women played a massive role. You know, they worked in the office as support staff, and they worked in the canteen, but there were women who serviced the aircraft. There were women involved in the communications and signals department, and in fact in the film we have a lady called Wendy Carter, who was a teleprinter operator, which would send messages between Bomber Command HQ and to the bomber stations, then out to the individual squadrons. And she tells a remarkable story.
And like Bletchley, these women knew a lot more than perhaps they were given credit for at the time, and kept their lips sealed.
Well, that's right.
Extraordinarily important. The other thing, and you know this not least because you did the Spitfire movie as well, is that these were weapons of war. And even within the veterans of Bomber Command, there are declining numbers of them, bless their souls, but even those who still talk about it, you know, if you mention Dresden or somewhere like that, it still causes real pain and real agony. You're not making a hero out of a means of destruction, but basically that's what they were, and they had a job to do between 39 and 45.
That's absolutely right. I mean, when we look back to Spitfire, which seemed like a challenge to make at the time, now we just look at it and say, oh, it's a film about the defence of freedom. But Lancaster was about the much more difficult task of what it takes to win a war. And that is challenging and still controversial. And Ant, my co-director, and I, we thought about this long and hard because we knew we couldn't escape from it. There's no pretending that Dresden didn't happen. And so we just knew we had to build to that story. Yes. And we had to deal with it head on. And our basic approach is one of context.
Yes.
You have to understand that time and what was going on. Because too many people say now, oh, why did they bomb Dresden so close to the end of the war? Well, in February 1945, there was no guarantee the war was going to end. It could have dragged on for months, if not years. So you have to understand the context of it. And surely Dresden was a terrible event, but it was one terrible event in many terrible events in the war.
The other argument I hear frequently from my father's group of friends when he was alive and what have you, is you mentioned Dresden, they'll say, yeah, OK, Coventry, Southampton, war is war.
Well, that's right. That is one of the things the veterans say. But, you know, we interviewed 38 veterans, and they all have different viewpoints and different opinions. And some of them who were on the Dresden raid, one chap in particular had never really spoken about it. And when we were interviewing him, he was very reticent and didn't want to say much about it. And he said, well, of course, we had to do it and all the rest of it. But in the end, I felt that he came to... he was in a good place when we finished the interview because he'd been able to speak what he really felt about it. And they had been asked to do that raid. The raid was no different from any other. And they went on it and they did the job. And it was subsequent responses to it. Churchill's response to it was negative because the raid had gone like clockwork. It had been really effective. And then after the war, the response from the public, from politicians, from everyone was very much a kind of slightly embarrassed, maybe we shouldn't have done that thing. And so the veterans have lived with this cloud over their heads for 70 years. And in fact, it wasn't until in 2012 when the Bomber Command Memorial was opened that finally they felt that there was some acceptance of what they'd done.
How important was it to those veterans who attended the premiere that some of today's top Royal Air Force brass were there as well?
I think they were really pleased to see them, you know? And they still say, sir. There's certain habits, I think, when you've been in the military that you can't get rid of. But, of course, the top brass look to the veterans as absolute heroes. And the veterans, of course, never want to be described as heroes. They were just doing a job that had to be done. But no, I think the veterans are so close to the hearts of everyone in the RAF because they recognise they're the people who made them what they are.
Yeah, also, not just the Royal Air Force, but also I noticed that a very good friend of mine and very good friend of this programme, Penny Mordaunt, who was an armed services minister and, in fact, Secretary of State for Defence as well, but is now in international trade. She was there. It mattered to her, although she's a Navy lass.
I know. No, Penny has actually been a supporter of the project for a little while.
Well, did she get involved in the Spitfire one as well? Because,
No.
I mean, the Spitfire, Eastleigh, there's a lot of Southampton, Portsmouth, Eastleigh connection with Spitfire as well, isn't there?
Yeah, no, I certainly hadn't met her there.
So what's her connection with Lancaster?
It's merely that one of the companies companies that became interested in helping us trying to raise finance, she has a connection with them. And so she came along to one of the screenings. But there's no string pulling or anything like that.
No, of course not. Above all of that. Yeah. We have a mutual friend who's sitting outside and refused to come in when I saw him there, Steve Milne, who, for those in the business, there used to be a brilliant post-production company called Molyneux. Molly, we all called it. He sold that on and he's now running British Film. What's the last word of it? British Film Company. British Film Company. And I met him through the horsey world, first of all, because he's got a kid who rides as well, which is lovely. He pinged me all of a giggle, saying, have you seen the Daily Mail? Have you seen the Daily Mail? Top Gun Maverick got 4 stars. We got 5.
That's right, yeah.
In the real world, does that matter?
Well, who knows? Who can tell? I mean, I wish we had Top Gun's marketing budget. That's all I can say. But, we're very keen that people go and see it at the cinema. It was released last night in cinemas across the country. Because we don't have that marketing budget and we don't have that reach, our distributors, Altitude, are doing their very best to get it in as many cinemas as possible around the country. Go and see it, at the movies, because it is a cinematic film. But it's on DVD and Blu-ray from Monday and on Sky much later in the year.
I'm genuinely intrigued from a purely business point of view. Forget the cinematography, and we were just looking as you were chatting, because some people listen to our conversation on radio as well as on television, the beautiful images of the Lancaster and its fabulous structure and the rest of it. But in terms of getting those images and your movie out into the cinema, as you say, you're not Sony, you're not Warner Brothers, what have you. How do you actually do that as a business, you and Steve and the gang?
Well, I mean, there's a group of us, of producers. So Ant and I set the film in motion, and then the other producers came on board. Yeah. So there's a couple of different production companies. We have to raise the funds for it. It's the most difficult thing about making an independent film. And then you make the product, which is the film, and then with that product. Now, Altitude, the distributors, they loved Spitfire, and they wanted to come on board straight away.
Yeah, I'm going to butt in simply because, again, we're looking at there's a mixture of black and white. This is the trailer, but and you will well know because you made it. But it includes historic stuff, black and white pictures, as well as absolutely fabulous air-to-air pictures of the modern last flying Lancaster. What's the balance between that?
Well, I mean, we again, if you've seen Spitfire, you know that we had a mixture of air-to-air footage shot by John Dibbs, who's an absolute master of it. Yeah. With Lancaster, we wanted to use the same basic formula, but we were so limited because there's only 2 flying Lancs left, one in Canada and one here. And
I thought there was only one. There's one in Canada as well.
That's right. But we couldn't go to Canada because of COVID. Yeah. And but the COVID silver lining, of which there weren't many, meant that the Battle of Britain Memorial flight were able to, they had spare hours on the airframe, and they still needed to keep their aircrew trained, and so there was some delicate negotiation, and they agreed to let us film a training flight.
Quite a busy engagement coming up next weekend.
They have,
We'll be talking about that. Final point is this, and I've discussed it with Steve as well. You've done Spitfire brilliantly, you've now done Lancaster, and I look forward to seeing it, but from the trailer, it's pretty clear to me it's damn fine. What's next? I would like to bid, if I may, for Mosquito.
Well, you bid right.
Have you got your little eye on that?
Well, I've already started doing the interviews. So, I mean, it's a much smaller pool of people because not so many people flew Mosquitoes as flew in Lancs. Yeah. So you're already dealing with a smaller pool there. But also, you're dealing with age. I mean, the youngest person we interviewed for Lancaster was 95. Now, the youngest person we can interview for Mosquito is 99.
Goodness gracious.
Well, we've got 3 of them in the can so far.
I'm thrilled to be. It's going to be talking about it on the programme tomorrow, and the project to try and get that Mozzie back up in the air.
That's right, the People's Mosquito, yeah.
Dad loved it. Made of plywood, fastest thing he ever flew in.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, he was a navigator, so steered it in the right direction. Real pleasure to meet you, David. And thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing the movie.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Give my love to Steve.
Will do. Thanks. Cheers. Thank you.
You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more coming up on the programme this afternoon. We're going to continue that conversation on the economy, but importantly, we'll be speaking to an expert financial journalist on how you and I can help save money as the cost of living crisis continues to hit all of us pretty hard. All of that and more after the weather. Look
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry with warm, sunny spells and the odd shower possible in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest of England, there'll be plenty of sunshine this afternoon. With light winds, temperatures will widely reach the high teens Celsius. There'll be a little fair weather cloud across the southeast, with plenty of warm, sunny spells and isolated light showers possible in the east. It'll be a fine afternoon for southern Wales, where it will be dry with plenty of warm sunshine and just a little fair weather cloud. The northwest of England will have a little more cloud, and this could also produce an isolated light shower. However, there'll also be plenty of sunny spells and most will stay dry. It's a similar story for the northeast of England this afternoon. Bright or sunny spells for most, with an isolated light shower possible. That said, most places will remain dry here too. There's little change in the weather in southern Scotland. Fair weather cloud and sunny spells here, with the odd shower possible towards the east. It will also be a fine and dry afternoon across Northern Ireland. Again, a little fair weather cloud is likely, with a very low chance of catching a light shower. Remaining mostly dry this evening, with plenty of late sunny spells on offer, although clouds steadily drifting west. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join us for a special GB News event.
The celebration of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
From pageantry here at the Palace
to the parties in your street.
We'll bring you 4 days of
unforgettable moments
this bank holiday weekend.
Join us live up and down the country as we share your memories
of Her Majesty's extraordinary reign.
Send us your stories, photographs and videos
at jubilee@gbnews.uk.
Come and celebrate with us
on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. If you've just joined us, it's 1 minute past 1. If you've been with us since 12, thanks very much indeed for sticking with us. I'm Alastair Stewart and we're into the final hour of the programme. I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio with plenty more still to come, including a little bit more on our top discussion on the economy, Rishi Sunak's promises, but also how the way we shop has changed since the cost of living crisis. You will hear from yet another wealth of guests who can also offer help and advice to all of you as these times continue to get pretty tough for all of us. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news. Here once again is Olivia Guthrie.
Thank Thank you, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past one. Here's the latest in the GB newsroom. Former US President Donald Trump has told a pro-gun convention America should prioritise funding for school security over aid to Ukraine. The summit was held just days after the murder of 19 children and 2 adults in a primary school in Texas. Hundreds of protesters are demonstrating in the state outside the National Rifle Association meeting. Mr. Trump rejected calls for gun control and says instead there should be a top-to-bottom overhaul of school security.
There should be strong exterior fencing, metal detectors, and the use of new technology to make sure that no unauthorized individual can ever enter the school with a weapon. No one should ever be able to get anywhere near a classroom until they have been checked, scanned, screened, and fully approved.
Meanwhile, there's growing anger towards the police over their response to the attack. Survivors, including children, were calling emergency services for help from the classroom long after 18-year-old Salvador Ramos had entered with a semi-automatic rifle. Police officers were in the hallway outside, waiting for more assistance. Colonel Stephen McCraw, director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, says officers should have acted sooner.
Hey, from the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can.
Here, Boris Johnson's told Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky intensive work is taking place among allies to resume the export of grain from the country. It's as Ukraine's military says its soldiers may need to retreat from their last stronghold in the east of the country to avoid being captured. Moscow has sent thousands of troops into the Luhansk region, attacking from 3 sides in an attempt to encircle Ukrainian forces holding out in the city of Severodonetsk. Well, as Boris Johnson told President Zelensky he's working to resume the export of grain, the UN has said a record 220 million people may go hungry because of the conflict. An official says 6 million tonnes of grain and almost 14 million tonnes of corn are blocked in Ukrainian ports. Rising costs of food and fertilisers are threatening global food security. The number of people in the world suffering malnutrition was on the rise even before the conflict. It reached almost 200 million in 53 countries last year. Football fans are welcoming the news that the sale of Chelsea Football Club will go ahead. The Chelsea Supporters Trust have issued a statement congratulating the consortium led by Todd Boy on its successful takeover bid. The club was put up for sale in March when owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned for his links to President Putin. It's expected the deal will be completed on Monday. Ireland has confirmed its first case of the monkeypox virus. The Health Service executive says the case was confirmed in the east of the country last night. Yesterday, the UK Health Security Agency said the number of cases in England is 101, while the total in the UK is 106. Thousands of people are gathering in Belfast today to celebrate the centenary of the creation of Northern Ireland. There are speeches outside Stormont and there's a parade into Belfast city centre. There were plans to celebrate 100 years since partition last year, but events had to be postponed because of the pandemic. EasyJet says it's cancelling over 200 flights over the next 10 days from Gatwick, starting from today. The airline says the move isn't connected to the IT issues they were experiencing earlier this week. They apologise for the disruption, but say they're necessary to provide reliable services over the busy half-term break. Meanwhile, travel company TUI have also announced a small number of flight cancellations at Birmingham, Gatwick and Manchester. And the stakes are high as 60,000 Liverpool fans travel to Paris for tonight's Champions League final clash with Real Madrid. The Reds will take on the Spanish champions at the Stade de France. The final was originally meant to be held in St. Petersburg, but it was moved to Paris after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The match kicks off at 8 p.m. tonight, and Liverpool fans in the French capital are confident of victory.
We're going to win it. Yeah, definitely.
We're going to meet a group of lads in the fan zone later on this afternoon. Liverpool, we're going to win 3-1.
3-1.
My prediction.
Hard to comment. 2-0.
Well, I think it'll go our way, and it'll be 3-1.
Fighting talk. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Alistair.
Olivia, thank you very much indeed. So, talking about the Rishi Sunak package and alternatives, we had brilliant guests on at the top with Lord Norman Lamont and Sir John Mills. You were clearly listening very carefully because I asked for your comments and you have been sending them in their numbers. We're going to do some at the very end of the programme, but these three are great because they pick up specifically on a couple of things that my first two guests said. Jackie says, this means that those with a couple of homes are rewarded while the poorest families struggle to afford to run one home. Well, you heard Norman Lamont say he thought that was an error, but it might prove tricky for the Chancellor to unpick it. But maybe he should try when he bears in mind what Jackie has to say. Tim says, how can a Chancellor who declared before the Russian invasion of Ukraine and in the middle of Britain's 8th mildest winter since records began that one of the reasons for higher energy prices was that we were experiencing colder weather than usual? Don't forget what Norman Lamont said as well. Take the energy element out of it and you've still got core inflation of round about 5 or 6%. But thanks for that, Tim. And finally, Mike says, as a pensioner, I do have to choose between heating and using the dishwasher, and that angers me no end. Thanks for those comments. Do keep them all coming in, and as I say, we'll try and read some more out when we get to the end of the programme. Let's return now to the top discussion, Rishi Sunak's cost of living package and his rescue plan. Delighted to be joined by yet another guest here in the studio with me. Elliot Keck is the investigations campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. You have a new ally, or a confirmed ally, in the Sun newspaper today. It's not a news report, it's a leader column in the best-selling newspaper in the country. Cut personal taxes and cut them now. But Lamont warned of inflation. How do you balance those two?
Well, I think the Sun has it absolutely spot on. We have a cost of government crisis as much as we have a cost of living crisis. Government costs spending has spiralled, quite frankly, out of control. We have taxation at a 70-year high. And I think the recipe for putting money back in people's pockets, direct cash transfers is one way to do it, but another way to do it is scrap the health and social care levy, bring forward income tax cuts, double income tax cuts, and also scrap the green levies, and that will make a big, big difference to people's day-to-day
Intriguing.
lives.
I want to unpick that a little bit because it's a very important and profound statement.
Yeah, sure.
You're not talking about the cost of government in terms of how much it costs to run the Home Office or the Foreign Office. To quote back what you said in the wake of the Sunak statement, and I quote, taxes are the biggest bill that families face, and these huge handouts will see politicians hoovering up the incomes of struggling taxpayers, creating another cost of government crisis.
Yeah, well, at the moment, government is taking with one hand to give with the other. So we see increases in national insurance, we should see a freezing of the income tax threshold, and the way they then try to alleviate all those problems that they're piling on families day in, day out is to suddenly give out cash transfers. And that's fine. That's going to be very helpful to families in the next 6 months to a year. And it probably is necessary.
Norman Lamont and John Mills said, no, this is the right thing to do. There are nuances, but there are people out there who are seriously hungry.
Absolutely. And I think that there are some good elements about the way that this is being targeted, particularly to people on low incomes, but that does nothing for the incomes of people in a year, 2 years and 3 years. And what we need for people in the next 3 to 4 years is we need to see some serious income tax cuts. I mean, we've called for bringing the income tax cut forward and maybe even cutting it to 15%.
Yeah, 15%.
Yeah, be bold and be radical. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got 1p off before the next general election. You're saying 5p off right now.
Well, we're saying that we'd certainly bring it to 2p, but we have suggested that if you bring it forward to 5p, you're going to suddenly see that cost of living crisis.
The other thing that I find
massively.
intriguing, and I put this both to Norman and to Sir John, is I trained as an economist at university, and I've been fascinated in the whole thing for decades, is that the really profound debate that's raging at the moment about the economy and particularly fiscal policy, tax and spend, is within the Conservative Party. It is not between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I think the Conservative Party at the moment and the Conservative government has, somewhat understandably become addicted to high spending measures as a result of the pandemic. It's a very easy way to get good headlines across the press.
But you're the campaigns manager.
Well, yeah, I mean...
You've got John Redwood singing from the right hymn sheet, you've got David Davis singing from the right hymn sheet, you've got Steve Baker singing from the right hymn sheet.
Yeah, sure.
And yet those who sit round the cabinet table are not with you anymore.
Well, I think it's very difficult when you go into government and when you go into your departments to tell those departments that you're actually going to have to start making some serious cost savings and some serious efficiency savings. There are things that the Taxpayers Alliance have looked at, bringing annual leave allowances in the public sector into line with those in the private sector. That would probably save about £3 billion a year. Very, very difficult for government ministers who may only be there for a couple of years to turn up to their civil servants and tell them you're only going to be getting the 25 days plus bank holidays. But these are the sort of things we need to be seeing. Government needs to start cutting spending. It needs to start cutting the size of government, and it needs to start cutting taxes.
If that's what people think, and the Sun newspaper is renowned for knowing what its readers think and what its readers want, they wouldn't be running that leader if they didn't think that the majority of Sun readers wanted that and wanted it now. I repeat the point to you. How do you, as a campaigning organisation, win this government back, win this Conservative Party back? Because you're not going to get what you want from the Labour Party were they to win an election, let alone Labour in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. You can only get what you want from a Conservative Party government.
Listen, I don't think that's necessarily the case. We are a non-partisan organisation. I think the Labour Party, to be fair to them, have made some good noises on things like the health and social care levy, which they opposed. They've made some good noises.
That's the increase in national insurance, 1.25%.
1.25 percentage points on businesses and employees. They've made some good noises on reforming business rates. Obviously, they did support the Windfall Tax, which is something we oppose. But I think even people on the left are starting to realise that actually the best thing for working people and for families is for them to keep more of their paychecks at the end of every month.
That's an absolutely remarkable assertion. I'm not going to argue against it because you're the campaigns guy and you know what's going on. But I did notice that Rachel Reeves particularly and Pat McFadden, who's her deputy in the Treasury, they have a pretty good grasp compared to some of their predecessors on how economies work and what have you. And you're now saying that they're beginning to see the merit in leaving folk out there with more of what they earn to make their own decisions at the point of consumption in the marketplace, in the shops, online.
Absolutely. If you're the Workers' Party and you're the party for the working people, you should want working people and you should trust working people that they can spend their money better than government can. I don't think that's a controversial point, and I don't think that's necessarily a point that should divide left and right.
I'm going to bring in Isabel Lawrence now, who's a financial journalist and works very closely with our good friend Jasmine Birtles on Money Magpie, which is one of the best websites to help people save whatever money they've got. Before we come to that specifically, hi, good to see you, Isabel, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Before we come to what he was just talking about, which is really how we make sure that folk keep as much of their hard-earned money as possible, are we going through something of a revolution in relearning how to make proper savings, how to cut deals, how to reduce that shopping bill? Have we got... Is Isabel there? I think we've got a cable problem. Don't you go away. If you can hear me, stay where you are and then come back to me when we can talk about it. What I was going to say to her, and I'll stick with you on it, because it's the other side of the coin, is as our reporter in the East of England was just saying, when people go through hardship and end up at food banks, you do fundamentally review how you live and the decisions that you make. And in that brutal, almost cruel sense, a bit of a cost of living crisis isn't bad for individuals to review their budgets and review how the economy works.
I think a cost of living crisis is never good for people. I think people should always have the incomes and the the means available to them to live happy, comfortable lives. And one of the reasons why they're struggling to do that at the moment is because their paychecks are being diminished every single month. But you're right to talk about you mentioned it earlier in the show. I think the rise of voucher shopping, and these are great ways for people to save money. And I think what's really concerning is that the government is talking about banning some of these schemes in terms of buy one get one free, for example. They've only delayed that ban. And these are the exact sort of measures that we see time and time and time again from government that insists that it knows best how to solve people's problems, and it proceeds with these measures with the absolute certainty that they know best. And I think that's a fundamentally wrong way to run an economy, but it's also the wrong way to treat the British public and British taxpayers.
That's a really good example, the buy one, get one free business, because it wasn't consumers that put the pressure on the government to ease off, it was the retailers.
Yeah.
They are worried about recession as well, for the very simple reason. Let's talk absolutely schoolboy and schoolgirl economics. If you and I stop shopping, or you and I cut our weekly budget by 5, 10, 15%, there's only one sector of the economy that really hurts from that, and that's the retailers and their suppliers.
Yeah, of course, and retailers and suppliers then suddenly have to start looking at cutting people's wages, laying people off. That means more people on benefits, that means more costs to the taxpayer, and you just end up getting into this vicious circle.
Are you seriously concerned that we may be, as a lot of people said in the wake of Rishi Sunak's statement, this wasn't so much about cutting energy bills as avoiding recession?
It's understandable that every government wants to avoid a recession, and I think this government's not wrong to avoid a recession, but in order to avoid a recession in the long term, you need some serious supply-side reforms.
Yeah.
And you need to create a business and regulatory environment in which it becomes desirable to invest. And yet again, you look at the recent measures the government have been implementing, and you're looking at a windfall tax, you're looking at an increase in corporation tax, and then the national insurance levy on employers as well as on employees. And you're just looking at a government that seems determined to turn Britain into a high tax, high spend, bad for business economy.
Message received loud and clear. Elliot, thanks very much indeed. I'm delighted to say that Isabel Lawrence can now join us. I think somebody trod on a cable or something like that, Isabel. I'm very sorry. I just want to confirm before we start, you can hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
I can hear you. That's absolutely brilliant. Elliot Kett from the Taxpayers Alliance just said something, they said a whole lot of things that were quite profound, but one of them was that actually it isn't good to go through a cost of living crisis for anybody because that, it hurts, it's painful and the rest of it. But let me put back to you that we have relearned how to be more cautious, to tear vouchers out of newspapers, to make sure that our loyalty card is up to date. There is a kind of saving revolution going on out there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think people are learning to be frugal in ways they haven't had to be frugal before. They're having to make their money go further. And like you said, things like discount codes, coupons, loyalty cards, they're definitely coming in more handy than ever.
Do you sense, as a financial journalist, that the other people that you talk to, because I know that, like Jasmine, you talk to consumers and ordinary folk like me and Elliot, but you also talk constantly to the retailers, the distributors, the supply chain people. How nervous are they about the possibility of slipping into recession?
Extremely nervous. I was just speaking to a lady yesterday who owns a small business, and she said, she's struggling to choose between putting the prices up to cope with increased costs and losing customers. So she's worried that if she puts the prices up too much, she'll lose people. And that's a really big struggle. She's got to pay wages, she's got to pay rent, she's got to pay for the products themselves. So businesses really are struggling, and it's causing a lot of worry for a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you've got a loyalty card that offers you a cheaper price because you've got that card, or you tear a coupon out of the newspaper and take it into your corner shop or your retailer, your supermarket, where it might be, notionally, that's costing the retail sector money.
Yes, it is. Yes. I think sometimes companies can reimburse supermarkets for the coupons used, things like that. And it's more of a branding thing in that way. But it's definitely useful for consumers. And I think at the moment, the consumers are the most important in some aspects because people do have to eat. So if using a coupon is what needs to be done, then that's what needs to be done, unfortunately. And, hopefully it won't cause businesses to lose out too much, but people do need to be eating.
Final two questions, because we've only got a minute and a half left, and I'm not going to bring you back in, Elliot, because we lost Isabel there by the link, so I just want to spend the last couple of minutes with her, if I may. The first one is this: from all of your research and your writings and chatting to friends like Jasmine and what have you, are we missing any tricks here? Because I've got the voucher thing, I've got the loyalty card thing, and I've got bulk buying, and I've even got grow your own, which Jasmine was talking about when she was last around. Give me two or three things that folk listening to this conversation might not yet have thought about.
I'd always say check your bank statements, check the last 3 to 6 months. We all have a direct debit or two we don't realise are going out. Make sure all your direct debits are the correct amount, that you're not being charged too much. You might be spending, £50, £60 a month on direct debits you're not using or being overcharged for. Similarly, I'd say cancel any streaming services you're not using. I think we all got streaming services over the pandemic to keep us occupied. So maybe scale it back to 1 or 2. There's so many amazing free things to watch out there. So many streaming services that are free online. So maybe try and stick to them, things like that. And I always think it's the smaller things that really help people. So just turning your thermostat down by 1 degree can save you 10% on your energy bill. Stuffing drafts with towels. Getting an electric blanket is a much cheaper way to keep warm than the heating. So it's all the little things I think definitely add up.
They all add up there. And the final point is this: as a financial journalist, are you more worried about the lack of growth, or are you more worried about inflation?
Definitely inflation at the moment. I think the lack of growth will come later as a worry, but I think inflation for the short term is definitely the bigger worry.
Isabel Lawrence, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, and give my best to Yasmin if you see her before I do. And Elliot Keck as well, Campaigns Manager for the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you very much indeed. And for your patience in the middle where we had a technical hiccup. A real pro, bless you. Thank you both very much indeed. We have plenty more to come in the last 37 minutes of this programme here on Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, we'll be heading to Northern Ireland, where, as you heard in Olivia's news, celebrations are underway to mark the 100th anniversary since the creation of that country. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry with warm, sunny spells and the odd shower possible in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest of England, there'll be plenty of sunshine this afternoon. With light winds, temperatures will widely reach the high teens Celsius. There'll be a little fair weather cloud across the southeast, with plenty of warm, sunny spells and isolated light showers possible in the east. It'll be a fine afternoon for southern Wales, where it will be dry with plenty of warm sunshine and just a little fair weather cloud. The northwest of England will have a little more cloud, and this could also produce an isolated light shower. However, there'll also be plenty of sunny spells and most will stay dry. It's a similar story for the northeast of England this afternoon. Bright or sunny spells for most, with an isolated light shower possible. That said, most places will remain dry here too. There's little change in the weather in southern Scotland. Fair weather cloud and sunny spells here, with the odd shower possible towards the east. It will also be a fine and dry afternoon across Northern Ireland. Again, a little fair weather cloud is likely, with a very low chance of catching a light shower. Remaining mostly dry this evening, with plenty of late sunny spells on offer, although clouds steadily drifting west. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's, what is it? It's 27 minutes past 1. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, TV and radio. As Olivia's been telling us throughout her news bulletins, this weekend, the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland is hosting its Northern Ireland Centennial Parade in Belfast, and over 20,000 people will be taking part. The event marks 100 years since the creation of Northern Ireland and is expected to bring up to 60,000 spectators into the city. Last year, the pandemic stopped it from going ahead. For more, I'm delighted to be joined by our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who is there for us in Belfast. Big deal, delayed, how's it going?
It's going fabulously, actually. There is about 25,000 people here in Stormont at this minute in time. The parade's just making its way down the Royal Mile to come out the gates behind us before it swings right down the Newton Ards Road to a very, very packed city. I can tell you right down into East Belfast, the roads are lined here. So a great result for the Orange Order, maybe not so much for Northern Ireland.
And talking of great results, with Sinn Féin now the largest party in the Assembly, albeit not yet meeting because of the protocol problems and the rest of it, how long do you give, Dougie, the union?
Well, it is the big talking point today. If tolerance and respect were flags, they're both missing off the top of Stormont. There's no Union Jack flying and no Northern Irish flag flying, and that's because it was blocked by two parties that are continually lecturing everybody about being tolerant, and that's the SDLP and the Alliance Party. So when unionists cannot celebrate their own culture here, I think they feel very, very under threat. The protocol, of course, is bringing sovereignty back in to question. Of course, the Good Friday Agreement was brought about by John Major's statement that Britain no longer had a sovereign or economic interest in Northern Ireland, and then Articles 2 and 3 of the Good Friday Agreement were dropped. Articles 2 and 3 of the Irish Constitution claiming some sort of belonging over Northern Ireland were dropped, and that allowed the Good Friday Agreement to go ahead. That has been rode over by the protocol. Article 6, the Act of the Union, destroyed by the protocol. So I think we are in for choppy times in Northern Ireland. Will it see another 100 years? Who knows? What will Britain look like in 100 years? Will we see a federal states of Britain with an almost, I suppose, Strasbourg-type look to Westminster and maybe a separate Irish, Welsh and Scottish Parliament? I think not only has the protocol, but this pandemic and the war in Europe changed politics, I think, irreversibly.
Absolutely intriguing. And you talking about the arguments that are taking place over the protocol. There's also the issue of the legislation going through the Westminster Parliament. When Parliament returns after the Jubilee break, it'll go into the committee stage. And at the moment, it has absolutely zero support from the unionist members of Parliament, because it seeks, as the Secretary of State put it, to draw a line under the Troubles. Whoever got killed by whomsoever, you're not going to get a successful prosecution. People want to move on. Do you sense, as a reporter with his finger on the pulse, that those good folk behind you right now, who've turned out for a celebration, to see a parade, they too just want to move on?
I think on this particular issue they do, and that's for one reason. When Tony Blair did the Good Friday Agreement, there was backdoor deals done to hand the IRA letters of comfort and Queen's pardons of mercy, so they would never see court, they would never see prosecution, so therefore their victims' loved ones would never know what happened to them. And there has been a constant trial, if you like, of British forces, police forces, security forces, and they keep on bringing them back. There has been case after case. The legal bill here is eye-watering, and really I think it is a rewriting of the past, and most people are glad to see it just stop.
Perfectly put, as I would expect from you. Great guy there, Doogie, our Northern Ireland reporter. I'm grateful. I hope the rest of the day goes well and that you manage to enjoy it as well. Doogie Beattie, thank you very much indeed. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've plenty more still to come in the final half hour, including the return of coupon shopping and the rise of loyalty cards to help us all save a few pennies and sometimes a lot more. I'm delighted to say that we'll be speaking to the top businesswoman who helped create the Tesco club card, plus also a top businessman who used to stamp his ground in the Dragon's Den. All of that still to come, but first let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest news headlines. Here once more is Olivia.
Thank you, Alistair. It's just coming up to 1:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Donald Trump has told a pro-gun convention in America that school security in the country should be ramped up. The former president was speaking at the summit just days after the murder of 19 children and 2 adults in a primary school in Texas. Hundreds of protesters were outside where President Trump was addressing the National Rifle Association meeting. He's rejecting calls for gun control and instead calling for a top-to-bottom overhaul of school security. Boris Johnson has told President Zelensky he's working with international partners to resume the export of grain from Ukraine. The Prime Minister added that the UK will work with G7 partners to push for urgent progress. It's after the UN said a record 220 million people may go hungry because of the conflict. An official says 6 million tonnes of grain and almost 14 million tonnes of corn are blocked in Ukrainian ports. Ireland has confirmed its first case of the monkeypox virus. The Health Service executive says the case was confirmed in the east of the country last night. Yesterday, the UK Health Security Agency said the number of cases in England is 101, while the total in the UK is 106. Football fans are welcoming the news that the sale of Chelsea Football Club will go ahead. The Chelsea Supporters Trust have issued a statement congratulating the consortium, led by Todd Boy, on its successful takeover bid. The club was put up for sale in March when owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned for his links to President Putin. It's expected the deal will be completed on Monday. And the stakes are high as 60,000 Liverpool fans travel to Paris for tonight's Champions League final clash with Real Madrid. The Reds will take on the Spanish champions at the Stade de France. Liverpool are looking to win their 7th European Cup, whilst Real Madrid are trying to add their 14th to the collection. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. It's back to Alistair in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes to 2, and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. You have been getting in touch on our big topic of the day, literally just as the break came to an end. Fatch sent one in. Use cash instead of tap and go. Spending cash is more real than cards and helps you keep to a budget. Try and shop a couple of times a week rather than a couple of times a day. Thank you very much indeed for that, Fatch. Neil joins the conversation. The cost of living crisis is only partly caused by the rise in prices. A major contributor is the living by some people beyond their means. Fiscal responsibility is the only real way to remedy the problems. I kind of hinted at that with the Taxpayers Alliance earlier, but got shot down a little bit. But there we are. I'm glad Neil and I agree. Joe says a lot of people with second homes rent them out, and the utilities tend to be paid by the tenant and are in their name. So if it's a rebate on the bill, it'll be the tenant that benefits, not the owner. Well, let's hope so, Joe. I'm sure that many tenants will be hoping that that's the case. Finally, Kenneth, I think Rishi Sunak's done a great job with everything he has had to face from Brexit to the pandemic. It seems furlough has left many people still demanding something for nothing. I certainly think the poorest should be helped repeatedly until the crisis is over. Keep them coming. We're trying to protect a few minutes at the end of the programme. So, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, GB News, so you can catch up. Now, I'm absolutely thrilled about this next two items. First of all, loyalty cards that earn money, saving points and entitle you to special discounts are increasingly important to our shopping. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But until my next guest came along, it was pretty small beer. But Edwina Dunn launched and managed the Tesco Club Card. She and her husband created it and managed it for more than a decade through their company, Dunn Humby. And the rest, ladies and gentlemen, is history. I am absolutely thrilled to say that Edwina joins me live now. Great to see you. I have always wanted to do this, genuinely. Was it a light bulb moment, or had you and Clive been mulling it over for some time?
No, it probably wasn't as dramatic as a light bulb. I mean, Tesco, I think, had been thinking hard about how to engage in a different way with their customers to thank them. And I think it was a major new strategy. They'd tried so much and nothing changed, nothing moved the dial. And so they came to us, and the problem at the time was how to manage such a huge amount of transaction data, which would really be the outcome of what they decided to do, which was connect a card to an individual customer. So it was
Edwina, let me just butt in at that point, because it's a crucial point that you make, because, of course, in a sense, I mean, you're not a retailer, you don't run shops and what have you. What you and your husband are experts at is data management. So it's two sides to the coin. It helps me save a few bob with my weekly shopping, but also it tells, in this case, Tesco, the kind of stuff I buy, how frequently I buy it, what needs to be available in Hampshire that they don't need to worry about up in Northumberland or whatever it might be. It's data gathering.
That's so true. And this was the first time that the products that went through the till were actually connected to an individual person. So that was really the breakthrough moment. And it took an awful lot of technology that wasn't that advanced at the time to achieve it. And that was the real connection between the idea and the technology that enabled us to do it. It was really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely, and revolutionary, as I said in the introduction. You still say that it's all about wisely chosen shopping baskets. Do you think that we got a bit lazy when the going was so good, the economy was booming, and frankly, most of us, thank goodness, didn't have too much to worry about? Did we get a bit sloppy?
Well, I think we all got a little seduced by the idea of 3 for 2s, buy one, get one free. And we probably over-purchased at certain times. I think people are being much more careful now. But, you know, the differences between people and what they need and want are incredibly marked. So we're not all the same. We all want sort of slightly different things. And actually, these loyalty programs are about understanding our differences. And in doing so, they can tailor the offer far more effectively, which means individual people get a better offer than they would if it was the same for everyone.
How do you reassure somebody who says, yeah, I can see what she's saying, it makes perfect sense, and if it saves me a bob or two, hurrah for that, but I don't want Tesco or somebody else having all of that data about me? How do you reassure that person?
Well, I think if the offer, the balance on giving your data was not really strong, people wouldn't do it. So, like, Clubcard has 17 million users, which is phenomenal. It almost had 16 million users from day one when it was launched. I mean, it was just a wave of enthusiasm. Clubcard points give you £1 off for every 100 points. And then you can convert that actually to deals, which means instead of the face value of that £1, you can convert it to £3 and actually get something like Disney Plus or a host season's holiday or a visit to Legoland at a much reduced price. So it really is a tangible advantage, and it's not just a gimmick.
You are still very much, although you've now moved on from Tesco and basically they bought it back and are now doing it themselves, but you and your husband are still in the data gathering business. One thing that struck me, Edwina, reading up before this conversation, was that it's almost become a competitive thing in its own right. So if I'm running supermarket chain A, I want to make blooming sure that I'm doing as well in my discounts, my offers and what have you, as supermarket chain B. We're all winners.
Well, yes. I mean, I think like all ideas where you know, there's a first mover advantage, it's significant. I mean, in the first year that Tesco introduced Clubcard, they went from like a poor second in market share to #1 in less than a year. And then they doubled their market share within 3 years. So it was a phenomenal move. Being first has a tremendous advantage, and it's built now into the Tesco DNA. Other deals can be attractive, but they're not as embedded within organizations. And you see that by the market share that the supermarkets have. I mean, you know, Sainsbury's is still, you know, much, much smaller than Tesco, as is Aldi and Lidl. I mean, yes, they're doing good work. Yes, you know, they're making special offers, but understanding what customers want and matching it precisely with data and technology gives you an advantage that's really hard to replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. Final question. We've got about a minute left, Edwina, and let me repeat again, I'm thrilled to bits that you were able to join us at all. Thank you for all of your time. We must do it again when we can. But my final question is this, and I put it to Norman Lamont, who I know you know right at the beginning of the programme, and Sir John Mills, who you also know, I believe. How worried are you about the prospect of recession? And do you, as a hugely successful businesswoman, think, on balance, Sunak got it about right or underplayed it?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? And I think he did do a good job. I think it's going to be hard. I think actually the supermarkets of this country do a phenomenal job in actually helping people feed themselves, their families, and they use a lot of intelligence and knowledge to achieve that. And I think, you know, because it's numbers, just like with Rishi Sunak, it's about working out what's going to give the biggest return. So I think we are in good hands. Of course, I respect people are very nervous And it is going to be tough. We've spent a lot through COVID.
Edwina, how kind you are. Thank you for those final thoughts. And as I say, let's do it again sometime when we can. But for the time being, my thanks to you and best wishes to your husband. That's Edwina Dunn, the Tesco Club Card creator, with sage thoughts on how you can run your budget and how it also keeps all of the supermarket chains on their toes. My final guest is the second part of my thrill with this last 20 minutes of the programme, entrepreneur Piers Linney. He's the CEO of Moblox, and I'll tell you exactly what that means in just a moment. But more importantly, as well, as you'll recognise him immediately as a former ex-Dragon's Den dragon. Great to see you. Turning it entirely on its head, because I do want to drill into what you're doing now and the importance of your business in terms of helping other businesses thrive and create growth and the rest of it. But same question I put to Edwina there at the end. Do you think, on balance, Sunak got it about right or underplayed it? And how worried are you about recession?
So I was on the board of British Business Bank during COVID, so we put 90 billion into the market. So I think that what people don't understand, the government's got to use existing mechanisms, otherwise it takes too long to make anything happen. I think they took too long to do something. I think what they've done is it's welcome, and I think that using the systems they've got, the benefit system, the windfall tax, whatever they've called it, makes sense, and I think it's welcome. My issue with all of this is it's still short-termism. I still don't know, I don't know if you do, what the long-term plan is, because the only way out of this is growth. We've got a pie. If the pie stays the same size, has done for 15 years, all we can do is take different slices out of taxation. It's the same pie. If the pie grows, we all benefit. If the pie shrinks, recession, dare I mention the word depression, but let's talk about recession. If the pie's shrinking...
Well, John Mills and Norman Lamont were openly talking about stagflation as well. So you get inflation and no growth.
The problem is most people sit on TV talking about hyperinflation, stagflation. Most people watching don't know what the hell we're talking about.
Absolutely.
And I think about stagflation, normally in stagflation situations, which is where you've got a stagnant economy and inflation, you have low unemployment. We don't really have that. So it's quite interesting trying to work out where we are. But what this country needs and what the politicians are missing, I think, is a plan for growth.
Yes, I agree with
Otherwise,
that. Let's take that apart, because I do agree with you, and that's great, and I don't think any of my other guests have disagreed with that. And here's the other side to that coin. If you pump a lot of money into an economy, either through borrowing or even by cutting taxes in the short term or what have you, but you don't have goods to be purchased, as Edwina was just saying, then you will get inflation. That's the problem. Your business, Moblox, is basically to look at start-up companies, bright ideas, fresh ideas. Here's the question. Is Sunak, and perhaps even more importantly, the Department for Business, doing enough to help those bright young men and women who come knocking on your door and say, I've got a great idea, a great service that I can provide, or a great product I can flog, to get that into the marketplace?
Yeah, so Moblox, my new business, is not focused just on startups. It's anybody running a small business.
So a shot in the arm, a top-up as well.
6 million people, 75% are sole traders, half of GDP, half of the economy, and 60% of the private sector employment. It's huge. And the issue with small businesses is, because 75% of individuals, basically, it's very hard for the government to identify who they are.
Yes.
So often they slip through the cracks. So we might have to rethink, how do I identify somebody who's a small business? Because the worst case, if you've got a job, right, and you get a 2-3% pay rise, inflation is 10%, you've taken a 7% hit, not ideal, in terms of your disposable income. If you're a small business owner, I think one of your guests earlier mentioned, I was watching on the way here, said that you're getting squeezed. Your costs are going up, rent rates, people, everything, your input costs into your product or service. You can't pass on that into a price rise to your customers, so your margin's getting squeezed. And the small business, that's your income. So their income's going down as the cost of living goes up. It's a worst case scenario. So what we're trying to do is we're setting up a business which helps small business procure services in better, cheaper, faster, simpler ways.
So one of the things I hear a lot from friends of mine who are in business rather than in journalism, their message to government is not so much give us this, give us that, do the other, is get out of our way.
Yep. The system that seems to work is the one we have. I think there's a big debate, there's one at Davos actually, about, the triple bottom line. People are they're backing off a little bit from thinking about all stakeholders but again, that's short-termism. If we focus on today, the news cycle, the latest opinion poll. That's fine today. But long term, unless the powers that be, the politicians, those that make decisions that affect our lives, stand back and look at this and grow our economy, we're not going anywhere fast.
But growth, as I said again, I'll repeat it, that it either comes because you and I are spending more when we go into the high street or go to the car sales room and whatever it might be. Big ticket items as well as daily shops. But it's also got to be matched by people who are offering that service.
Absolutely
and at the moment, the likelihood of it being made in China or grown in India or coming from somewhere else is, it seems to me, higher than it has been in living memory. And that's a real problem.
Well, it's a problem. It's also just the way things are going to be. So, the economy and supply chains, I'm involved in businesses that got supply chains go all through Asia. So you can't get away from that. That's just the way the world is structured. And the issue we've got is that whether it's inflation or deflation, you get these spirals, don't you? So now you're going to see the public sector, the transport unions in a bonfire now because everyone's expecting prices to rise. So they want to earn more money. That fuels inflation. The government's borrowing money, printing money. That fuels inflation. And the only way normally you stop accelerating inflation, sadly, is a recession. That's what pours cold water on it. So we have to try and avoid that.
The final point is, and it flows directly from that point about prices going up and hitting hard times and pay rises. I remember when I was studying economics, inflationary expectations were crucial. If you go into your boss and say, I need more money, not because inflation's now 5%, but because I know for a fact it's going to be 10% in a few years' time. Bank of England have taken a real hammering in not having been tough enough on interest rates. But if they do now try and curb inflation with significantly higher rates, they're going to hurt all the people you're working with, whether it's a start-up, and I take your correction, or a company that's, middle-aged but needs a good boost.
Butcher maker, canister maker. Also, your point about deflation, if people think prices are going to go down, then they don't spend, so it delays it. I don't know. I think that the whole thing needs looking at. I think that they can't just keep pumping money into the economy. We need a growth plan. And I was looking on the way here about, did I mention Brexit? We are where we are. What are the opportunities? How do we monetize them? We're an independent nation now. How do we leverage that to, find a new place in the global economy? And that's what we need to be doing.
So in a nutshell then, final point from me, and you either say yes or no or you correct me, is that what you're basically saying is the sector that you know so well, it doesn't need a major detailed government plan. It just needs greater clarity on where it is that they want us to get to.
Absolutely. It needs recognising. Very good at recognising lobby groups and then big enterprises, but your small businesses, you hear the backbone of the economy, it's true. It's not recognised, therefore, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, you can't support it correctly, and they fall through the cracks. And we need to change that.
Brilliant. Piers, great to see you.
Good to see
very
you.
much indeed. You're welcome anytime. Thank you very much indeed. I wanted to ask Piers that at the end because Darren, I'm going to go back to a few emails now. Darren says it's a short-term fix. We need to think of something similar come the winter. It's long-term thinking. George says Rishi Sunak hasn't done a bad job, but he's missed the elementary and cost-free opportunity to help us all by abolishing the green levy on our power bills. That seems to me to be a no-brainer. George, you are not alone in saying that. That's it from me, but I'm delighted to say that in hot pursuit of this programme is the absolutely brilliant Darren Grimes. And there he sits. He's just over there, behind me, but it's the magic of television. What have you got on your agenda, Darren?
Alistair, we're going to be discussing what the heart and soul of the Conservative Party is. The Conservative Party at the moment seems pretty rudderless, as you've been discussing on your show earlier, and it's a pleasure to follow you, by the way, Alistair. We're going to be actually finding out what it is that this party actually stands for. An 80-seat majority, but a lot of people asking, Alistair, what are they doing with it? We're also going to be discussing e-scooters. Are they a miracle or a menace? And we're getting a super sports update at a time when the sale of Chelsea, the consortium, has gone through. There's going to be a preview of the Jubilee weekend and so much more, Alistair. So I'm hoping that the people watching you are going to stay on for a super 2 hours.
I'm sure they will. Darren, I look forward to it as well. Thank you very much indeed. So that's Darren Grimes coming up. But that is all that we have time for today. He's up next, but let me reassure you that I will be back here, same time, same place, 12 till 2 tomorrow. Until then, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day after you've watched Darren.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry with warm, sunny spells and the odd shower possible in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Starting with the southwest of England, there'll be plenty of sunshine this afternoon. With light winds, temperatures will widely reach the high teens Celsius. There'll be a little fair weather cloud across the southeast, with plenty of warm, sunny spells and isolated light showers possible in the east. It'll be a fine afternoon for southern Wales, where it will be dry with plenty of warm sunshine and just a little fair weather cloud. The northwest of England will have a little more cloud, and this could also produce an isolated light shower. However, there'll also be plenty of sunny spells and most will stay dry. It's a similar story for the northeast of England this afternoon. Bright or sunny spells for most, with an isolated light shower possible. That said, most places will remain dry here too. There's little change in the weather in southern Scotland. Fair weather cloud and sunny spells here, with the odd shower possible towards the east. It will also be a fine and dry afternoon across Northern Ireland. Again, a little fair weather cloud is likely, with a very low chance of catching a light shower. Remaining mostly dry this evening, with plenty of late sunny spells on offer, although clouds steadily drifting west. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join us for a special GB News event.
The celebration of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
From pageantry here at the Palace
to the parties in your street.
We'll bring you 4 days of
Unforgettable moments.
This bank holiday weekend.
Join us live up and down the country as we share your memories
Of Her Majesty's extraordinary reign.
Send us your stories, photographs and videos.
at jubilee@gbnews.uk.
Come and celebrate with us.
On GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me